approximately 20-plus formal meetings and over 40 subcommittee meetings. In that time, we've had great discussion, we've had community input, but here's where we need your input. This is the first meeting since we've been to the county board where we're having a broad meeting. And over the next several months, we will be looking for your input as well as the input of those who you would, of course, talk with and encourage to be part of this process. And so I want to thank you at the very beginning for helping us vision together and to shape the future. I want to take a moment just to introduce the working group members, aside from myself, because I had the privilege over this time to work with some wonderful individuals who have really made certain that community input
as well as conversation reached the level that it really needed to reach in order to make us reach the point where we are today. And so some who are present today, the committee and the working group members were made up of Michael Spots, who was our vice chair. He represented the Community Development Citizens Advisory Committee. Linda Kelleher, who represented our Community Services Board. Umair Hassan, who represented our tenants. Shalonda Brown, our nonprofit housing developer. Robert Bushkoff, our Economic Development Commission. Richard Donahoe, Home Ownership Working Group of the Housing Commission. Doris Topel-Gantos, for-profit housing developer. John Grant, who is our Transportation Commission representative. Matthew De Ferrante, Housing Commission. Joan Lawrence, Historic Affairs Landmark Review Board. David Leibson, the 10-year plan to end homelessness task force. David Peterson, our Disability Advisory Commission. Saul Reyes, the community-based organization. Candace Rose, Commission on Aging. Catherine Scruggs, Civic Federation. Stephen Sockwell, our Planning Commission. And Ori Wise, Tenant Landlord Commission. As you can see, reading all of those names and all of the commission, there was a wide and broad representation making up, of course, the working group. And each and every one contributed greatly and the many hours throughout all of these meetings. And so in 2012, we received a charge to remind many of you today that the purpose of the study is to create a shared community vision of Arlington's affordable housing as a key component of our community sustainability. The result will be an updated set of housing policies, goals, targets, strategies, and priorities that can be adopted by the county board as the affordable housing element of Arlington's comprehensive plan. So as we begin the process, I will be saying throughout the next several weeks over and over again, thank you very much for being present. Those of you who I may see, not just at this meeting, but in the meetings to come, in the other community gatherings, I want to say thank you for inviting someone to be part of the process. We're not at the end of the process. We're really at a new beginning in the process. And all of your contributions are going to be essential to make certain that we have a community that really is reflective of the vision that Arlington County has. And so I begin on this morning by reminding you of that vision, where Arlington will be a diverse and inclusive, world-class urban community with secure, attractive, residential and commercial neighborhoods where people unite to form a caring, learning, participating, sustainable community in which each person is important. This vision has guided our conversations. It has shaped all that has taken place over these several years that we have been meeting, working through data, trying to have great conversations that just don't keep us where we are, but help us to vision about where we want to go, and also will turn into action in the future. And so I remind each and every one of the Arlington vision that it would shape our conversations, shape your conversations, and also, too, it will push us to make your contributions and your comments throughout this process. And so while we have looked at the vision, it has guided our conversations. We asked the question, and it was already lifted by the chair, why does this matter? Why even have these conversations? And truth is, as we look, it is because first it supports our people. It supports not just individuals, but many of us know that in Arlington families matter. And so it supports our young families generationally. It supports the new families that are moving in. That we do know that housing, of course, affects a quality of life. And so it is important because it supports young families. It supports our seniors. One of the great pieces about Arlington County is that Arlington County has some long-term residents who have been here, who have not just moved here, they've been here generationally. And we want to be able to make certain that we have that broad range of housing that supports families throughout the broad spectrum that we would, of course, are going to be talking about, encouraging you to think about and reflect about on throughout this process. And it also, housing, of course, supports our employees. Many, of course, who live and work here, and many who want to live and work here, and many in the future who will be seeking to live and work here. And so it matters because it supports our people. Not only that, but it improves our neighborhoods. We all know that housing is important to sustaining community and sustaining neighborhoods, in that it gives communities stability. And many of us are here and want to be part of the conversation because you want a neighborhood that is stable. You want to be able to see that neighborhood continue to grow and develop. And there are a lot of conversations about not having it go in a different direction. Well, your contributions,
this process will help that as we share and as we talk and as we vision together. Not only will this process, of course, improve our neighborhoods, but it will improve our neighborhood because it helps us to maintain diversity. When we look at Arlington County prides itself, and of course we encourage diversity throughout Arlington County. It is one of the key features that helps to make this county unique and strong. It helps investment. It makes others who want to be able to invest in the community, be part of the community, and also too, housing supports and is supporting of transit. And that we look at transit, we're having great discussions about transit in its current form and transit in the future. Also too, housing strengthens our economy. And so we do know that economics helps to drive this. And we want to have housing that helps to drive up the economic part of the economic wheel. In that we do want to make certain, and housing is a key part of this conversation, where it gives us competitiveness. Where when individuals are looking, they want to be able to bring their businesses here, have a thriving business here, have customers who are coming. And so in that, economics also supports jobs. And that you have persons that can work here as well as live here. And businesses who want to be here and know that their employees are not coming from so far away that on certain days they wonder whether or not they'll be able to make it and provide services to our community. It provides us a great customer base where you're able to shop right where you live or within close distance of where you work. Also, too, there's local spending, that you're not having to worry about where the money is going, but there is investment in our community and local spending taking place. When we look at the process, once again, this process began at the end of 2012 and really began at the very beginning of 2013. We spent a great amount of time as the working group, as other citizens attended certain portions or certain meetings, where there was a great deal of information gathering taking place. You're going to hear about that information. You're going to receive information, probably more information that you want to hear about or even reflect upon. But truth is, it helped us to be able to understand the process. I will say that not only for myself, but many of us who are part of the working group, it was also an education process. We all have come from our different perspectives, bringing our certain expertise and understanding to the table. But what this process helped us to do was to see a much larger picture, to see all of the factors that are involved in this process. And there are many factors that really affect the process, that help us to understand the process. And I want to encourage you to pay attention to all of the details, all of the information that will be shared, because there's so much information, some great, some small, that really affect the process. But every contribution and every factor is important. Every comment that will be lifted, we want to be able to hear from you and want you to be part of this process. And so we spent a great amount of time with our consultants, who you'll hear from today, who did a great job
and really a yeoman's work on gathering information, putting that information together, even at a level where many of us would be able to grasp it and understand it, make shape of it. And hopefully we've done that for you as well, so that when you hear this, you'll be able to grab the key components and discuss them in appropriate ways. And so throughout 2013, there was a great information gathering period. And in the midst of that, we began the process where there was an interim data report, and then research and analysis took place. What does all of that mean? Not in and of itself, but what does it mean when it's alongside of other information? What does it mean when you start to look at it balanced with all of the factors and forces that we're looking at now and even expect to be there in the future? Then we got to a needs analysis report, and then stepped into a policy and strategy development, where we reach this great point now where we have, of course, presented to the county board members the Affordable Housing Master Plan, as well as the draft implementation framework. And again, I want to stress draft, that it is not in final form. It is draft. I'm grateful that the county board has reached the point where they said, take it out so that we would have greater discussion. Take it out and foster a great community conversation where we could receive good input and everyone would be part of the process. So I do want to take a moment to stress that it is in draft, and we are looking forward to your comments in all of the meetings, and there are several that you will hear about that are on the calendar right now that we want you to be part of and encourage those in your relationship and in communities to come out and be part of this before we get to the final, and so that your voices are even greater heard. We've had community input to this point, but it is the wish of the county board, as well as the working group members and others, to make certain that we have as much community input as we are able to gather at this particular point. And again, I say thank you. In all of the regional conversations that I'm involved in, I want to thank the county board in advance that in many regions, there is not a conversation like this taking place. There is not a conversation. There is not the boldness to step into a conversation that involves others, that are willing to hear from others. We all will begin sometimes conversations from our own perspective, but we're looking for a shared vision and a shared policy that benefits everyone. So I thank you once again. And here we are at this point where we're looking for review and community comment. So as I've taken the time to really begin to lay this out, I'm thankful for Lisa Sturtevant, who is here, who's going to take us through all of the data, who is going to take us through this. And while we have all of this data, I do have to say, don't worry about all of the data. She is one of the best presenters of data I've ever run into. So I have her come at this time.
Good morning. Add my thanks to all of you to coming this morning. And despite what Dr. Hamlin said, we're not going to see all the data this morning. So if that made your heart stop a little bit, don't worry. But we did do a comprehensive needs analysis, which I invite you to look at. It's available on the web. We had a meeting about it in the fall. But what I wanted to do as we start the day is to build on Dr. Hamlin's comments to lay a little bit of the framework so that we're all coming from a common place. One of the things that we were tasked with was to help think about what the future housing needs in Arlington County were going to be. And there were a lot of, there's been forecasts of household growth in the county. The county does these household growth forecasts every year. And our task was really to think about what are some of the characteristics of the households that will be adding to Arlington's population over the next 3 decades. And we wanted to look at things that really drive the demand for housing. And you can sort of imagine what these things are, right? A household's income will determine the kinds of housing that they can afford. A household's structure, whether it's families with children or whether it's a 4 or 5 person household versus a 1 person household, will determine the kinds of housing that will be needed. Whether it's a household with a person who is disabled or a person who is a senior citizen who may need accommodations in their house to allow them to age in place. And so one of the things I wanted to start with is this sort of, who are we talking about, right? Because we are going to talk about housing needs in terms of income. And for many of you, this idea of area median income is a term that you know well. But for others, this is a term that gets used a lot in housing studies and may not be as familiar to you. So what I wanted to just have you think about is when we talk about households in certain income groups, that there are people tied to those income groups. These aren't just households with incomes between 0 and 30% of area median income. If you look at the chart, you can see that in our region, that would be an individual who earns up to $23,000 a year, or it would be a household of 4 that earns up to $32,000 a year. This group can include folks living on fixed incomes, including seniors and folks with disabilities. This group also includes people who serve our community, including many retail workers, restaurant workers, social service workers in our community. And you can see the last column reflects the rent that would be affordable to these groups using standard assumptions of affordability. So we have used a measure of 30% of your income towards housing is called affordable. That's a pretty standard measure. And the reason for that is if you spend 30% of your income on housing, that has been shown to leave a sufficient amount of income for other things, for food, for health care, for transportation. And so that's the threshold we used to identify what prices of housing would be affordable at different income groups. So just you can see that a family of 4 with an income up to 30% of this area median income can afford an apartment, for example, that rents for up to $820. So you can sort of think about that family in your head, or that individual person in your head, and the housing that's available to them. I'm not going to go through all of them, but just taking the next group, we have people in this band that we call 30 to 60% of area median income. You can see the income ranges for a household of 4 and an individual. This could be an individual working as an administrative assistant, as an electrician, a bus driver in our community. And by the way, these are real wages. I'm not just making up these jobs and putting them in these categories. When we look at the wages that people who live here in Arlington are earning, these are the people who are serving our community in these wage groups. This could be a family with 2 workers in retail or restaurant work or in social service fields, and you can see the rents that would be affordable to these groups. So, we talk about these income bands, but I want you to also think about the people behind them, because we use that as sort of a shorthand to do these forecasts, and I don't want it to get lost that these are really households, people living in our community, either long-term or new to the community, and who support both the economic, the cultural, the social fabric of Arlington. So when we look at the current supply of housing, which is where we wanted to start, as we're looking ahead to what kinds of housing would be needed in the county, we wanted to understand where we've been over the last 10 or 15 years. Not surprisingly, multifamily housing, which includes both apartments and condominiums, constitutes the greatest share of housing. You can see the purple and green pieces of the pie. The greatest share of housing units in the county, followed by single-family detached homes and then townhomes. Growth in the housing stock, again, not surprisingly, you've seen the cranes, has been primarily in the multifamily sector. We've added 16,000 multifamily units between 2000 and 2013 here in Arlington County, including both rental and ownership. And although apartments are about 42% of the overall stock, 53% of Arlingtonians are renters. So 53% of households here in Arlington are actually renters. We know from the data that housing has become less affordable since 2000. And we have a few different ways that we can measure this. The dark blue solid line shows the number of market rate affordable rental housing units that are affordable to people up to that 60% of AMI. Remember, we talked about who those folks are. Over the past 15 years, we've seen a dramatic loss in these units that are what we call market rate affordable. They're meaning that they are in that affordable rent level as a result of their location or the age of the unit or the characteristics of the unit make it a little bit more affordable. And as we've seen that line go down, these market rate affordable units have been lost primarily because of rent increases, right? The market has allowed owners of these properties to raise the rents because there's such strong demand here in Arlington County that we've lost 13,500 of these market rate affordable units over the last 15 years. Okay? So the supply has gone down. At the same time, the dashed line shows the committed affordable units. These are the units that have been produced through the county's land use approval process and have been new units into the stock that have been affordable. And it's been the county's commitment to getting these committed affordable units into the supply, but as you can tell, that line is growing a lot more slowly than the loss. So when you restrict supply, I mean, even if you didn't take econ in college, you have less supply, prices are going to go up, particularly if demand remains the same or if demand increases. And we know Arlington is an increasingly attractive place, so demand for living in Arlington has actually increased over time. There are currently about 17,000 renter households with incomes below that 60% of AMI level. And currently, there are about 9,500 apartments that are affordable in that rent range we talked about to folks with incomes at or below 60% of AMI. This is where we found the greatest gap between the need currently and the supply currently. So we started with this information. And so you may be asking yourself, well, there's 17,000 of these households, and you're telling me there's only 9,500 units. Where are these folks living, right? They're here. They're doubling up. They're perhaps living in units we're not counting because they may be substandard or they may be off the books. They may be very likely folks who are spending much, much more than 30% of their income on housing in order to live here. And we did a number of focus groups back in the summer. That's what we heard. They said, no, we're spending 50, 60% of our income every month on our apartment, but Arlington is, we need to be here. Our job is here. Our kids' school is here. We value the community we're finding here, and so we're making it work. And so we start with this gap currently as we look ahead. But housing affordability, I want us to keep in mind, really means that there's a range of housing at various prices and rents that supports everyone in the community. What we're going to talk about today is the piece of the community that the market serves well and the piece of the community that the market hasn't been serving well. And I would have you remember this slide. This is a piece of the market that the piece of the community that the market has not served well. At the same time, you all are very well aware that home ownership has become more difficult for many in Arlington County. These lines show the average home sale price in Arlington. The average price of a single-family detached home in Arlington approached $800,000 in 2013. But you can see that prices for all housing types have gone up. And it has left the middle-income households really out of parts of the housing market. In 2013, about a third of the homes that sold here in Arlington were affordable to households with incomes in that middle-income range, up to 120% of that area median income. So this is a family of four making close to $120,000. Only a third of the homes for sale were affordable to people up to that income, and the majority of them were condominiums. And so home ownership has become more restricted in Arlington County. So we started with that as a baseline, and we went through this process where we did a model that forecasted what the household growth would look like over the next 30 years. I'm not going to go through the diagram, although I'm happy to have a conversation with anybody who wants to get more details. And the report has a lot of great information on where these numbers came from. But we looked at what the region's employment growth was going to look like over the next 30 years, and the employment's going to change. We're actually going to have greater growth in jobs with somewhat lower wages. And so we're going to have folks who are living more likely in one-person households. So we're going to have actually faster growth in households with lower incomes over the next 30 years. That is the reality we're facing. And you all are well aware of the news about sequestration and how declines in federal government employment affects our region. These are trends that are driving some of the forecasts of household growth. We also look at folks not in the labor force, so we do a demographic forecast that looks at how the population will age and how household sizes will change over time so that we can produce an overall set of forecasts that have by income as well as by household size and by demographic characteristics. We just touched just very briefly on the employment issue. One of the things that we know is that for there to be a diverse local economy, you need to have diverse types of workers, which means you need to have a diverse set of places for them to live. And so when we look at what the jobs are ahead, between 2010 and 2040, the region as a whole will add a number of jobs in this professional and business services sector. You can see 640,000 net new jobs. These are jobs that are really well-paying jobs, many of them, including people who work in the defense industry, people who work as lawyers, people who work as architects. These jobs also include a lot of folks who work in businesses that support higher wage jobs, administrative assistants, people who work in the janitorial services, people who support business functions. So we have a lot of people coming into this sector with a wide range of incomes. The areas that are going to grow faster than they have in the past include jobs in the education and health services sector, the leisure and hospitality sector, and construction. This is true regionally. Let me just put it in perspective. In the last 10 years, the professional business services sector drove our growth. The average wage was $90,000 for those jobs. In the future, education and health services, leisure and hospitality, construction, my average wage is $45,000 for those jobs. So we have to keep that in mind as we're thinking about the fact that we know that the lower income folks have the hardest time finding housing, but those are the folks who are really going to drive the employment growth in the region over the next 30 years. So what did we find? The county is expected to add 30,500 net new households over the next 30 years, or between 2010 and 2040. This number is consistent with the forecast that the county produces for the cooperative forecasting process and is based on an analysis of existing land use and zoning in the county. And so what we did was we looked at those other factors, demographic and economic, and found that we are expected to add about 37 households with incomes below 30% of AMI, about 37 households between 30 and 60% of AMI, and so on. Now, you can see that the biggest numbers, the sheer biggest numbers, are really among folks who earn higher incomes. That is a piece of the community that the market has typically served well, right? And so we needed to combine this forecast with the information we have about the current gap on the ground. We also found that we will see faster growth in larger households. We have a large millennial population that is aging and marrying and having children and wanting to stay in Arlington. So we'll add about 77 households with 3 or more people. Because of the baby boom population and sort of the demographic shape of the population nationally as well as here in Arlington, we'll see fast growth in our senior population and also our population of persons with disabilities. We'll add about 92 households headed by a person age 65 or older. In fact, this group will grow 3 times faster than the overall population. Okay, so that's one of the other findings from the forecast. So we're going to move into talking about the strategies, the policies, the tools that the county, along with the community, along with the county board members, and those of us on the consulting team, to meeting these needs. But I want you to keep these people in mind. That it's not just 3,700 households. It's 3,700 households that may include the folks who take care of your kids in the morning, or that serve you when you go to your coffee shop, or that are the folks who are driving the bus to get you to work in the morning. And that these numbers have these people behind them.